What is going on YouTube? Running Gun Sports back here with another video. Today is our weekly college football update. Not much college football news to talk about lately, really just a lot of recruiting news, but that's why today we are releasing our preseason top 5 running backs heading into the 2021 season. So top 5 running backs coming up at the end of the video for our preseason picks. And so if you have not already, please subscribe, leave a like down below, and share this to your friends who love college football. And let's get right into the video. Ernest Green III, down to 10 schools. He's a 4-star offensive guard from Oklahoma, his top 10 schools are Oklahoma, Texas, Oregon, Texas A&M, Ohio State, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and USC. 4-star outside linebacker, commits to Notre Dame, Joseph Burnham, 6'4", 215 pounds, from Traverse City, Michigan. 4-star defensive tackle John Walker announces top 12 schools: Ohio State, Florida, Miami, Texas, Georgia, Oregon, Alabama, Auburn, Florida State, Tennessee, Notre Dame, and USC. 4-star offensive tackle Emil Wagner is down to his top 6 schools: Auburn, Penn State, Kentucky, Stanford, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. Keontae Goodwin announces his top 5 schools. He's a 4-star offensive tackle from Charleston, Illinois. His top 5 are Kentucky, Ohio State, Michigan State, Clemson, and Alabama. 5-star defensive end Peter Woods announces his top 11 schools: South Carolina, Michigan, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, LSU, USC, Florida State, Texas A&M, Clemson, Auburn, and Alabama. And for our last recruiting news of the day, 5-star offensive tackle Zach Rice announces his top 5 schools: Virginia, Ohio State, North Carolina, Alabama, and Notre Dame. So that's the recruiting news for today. So now we're going to switch focuses into our top running backs going into the 2021 college football season. So we'll start from number 5 going to number 1. At number 5, I have James Cook from the University of Georgia. In 2020, he had 303 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did have a couple of touchdown catches in the air. We saw one versus Alabama. But I think James Cook will do really well this year. He's a junior, his 3rd year. He played as a freshman. He's got all the talent in the world. Brother of NFL superstar Dalvin Cook, the Vikings running back. And I think that Georgia's set to have a breakout year next year. I do think that they will win the East Division, and if they can get past Alabama, I think that they'll win the SEC and possibly could be playing for a national title. And I think they would have no problem making the college football playoffs. And that's just been Georgia's problem every year, is not being able to get past Nick Saban in Alabama. Kirby Smart came from Alabama, so it's got to be extremely frustrating for Kirby Smart to not be able to get past his old coaching buddy, who basically set him up for that job at Georgia. So we'll see where James Cook ends up being ranked at the end of the season. At number 4, I have Brian Robinson Jr. from Alabama. In 2020, he had 483 yards and 6 touchdowns. A lot of those came in mop-up times and games where they were blowing out everyone. I mean, what game did they not blow out everyone? Their closest game was a 1-touchdown victory versus Florida in the SEC championship game, a very good game. And it would have been a better game if Florida hadn't lost to LSU the week before, because Florida would have been playing for a chance to make the college football playoff if they had knocked off Alabama, which they didn't anyways. But Brian Robinson Jr., when he was in, he looked very hopeful for Alabama fans. He reminded me of how Najee Harris looked in the national championship game versus Georgia in that 2018 season. He's very fast, he's very big, and he can run guys over. He's very good out of the back, catching the ball out of the backfield. So a lot of potential for Brian Robinson Jr. And Alabama just produces running backs like nobody's business. So many running backs in the league. Najee Harris will be selected 1st overall in the draft this year, I assume. So very interesting to see how well Brian Robinson Jr. will do in the 2021 NFL season. Number 3, I have Jerome Ford from Cincinnati. Normally, when you see a guy like Jerome Ford, a superstar for not as not a Power 5 team like Cincinnati, a Group of 5 team, they're always a senior. Well, Jerome Ford is only going into his sophomore year. He is a drop down from Alabama. He played at Alabama for a year, didn't lose a year of eligibility, and he went out and had 483 yards in his first year with the Cincinnati Bearcats, and we already know they had a great year, just short of making the playoffs, and then barely lost to Georgia in the Peach Bowl. They blew a 10-point lead, but he had 8 touchdowns, 483 yards, as I just mentioned, and he's very strong. Obviously, if he has the talent to be going to Alabama, him playing in with Cincinnati, he's obviously going to be one of the better players on that team. And I think that the league that they play in is not as good as obviously the SEC, but I still think that he could play at SEC. He's obviously an SEC caliber player if he was recruited out of high school to play in the SEC by Alabama. And Nick Saban, we already know, he doesn't mess up on recruiting very often. So very excited to see what Jerome Ford has in store for next year. At number 2, I have Isaiah Spiller, the Texas A&M running back, and versus Alabama, he had a very good game. He was one of the guys that they could not stop in that game, and him and Jalen Watermeyer are the two key players for Texas A&M, and they're coming back next year, which is really hopeful for Texas A&M. They do lose quarterback Kellen Mond though to the NFL draft. It seemed like Kellen Mond had been around forever, but those are key players right there returning for the season. In Texas A&M with Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher already has a knack for recruiting great quarterbacks. We saw how he did in Tallahassee and at Florida State. He did a great job, but Isaiah Spiller is just very good out of the backfield, catching the ball. He can run the ball obviously very well. 2020 he had 1,036 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns. So a very good year for Isaiah Spiller, and I think he'll do even better next year when he is going to be the star player of that team next year and the leader of that team, with Kellen Mond not on the team anymore, and Jimbo Fisher will bring in a good quarterback to distribute to the ball to playmakers like Isaiah Spiller, Anaya Smith, and Jalen Watermeyer. At number 1 spot, I do have Breece Hall. I've seen a lot of lists looking at this, preparing for making my top 5, and Breece Hall is at the top of all of them. And Breece Hall, I don't think many people have heard of him before. Chuba Hubbard, the Oklahoma State running back, had opted out of the season due to COVID concerns. He opted out in the middle of the season, which to me, in my opinion, is not a very good look, and he's not being looked at very heavily by the NFL draft scouts and whatnot. And I just think that Chuba Hubbard made a very big mistake opting out of the draft. I just think that it was a little premature. They'd only lost one. They were very early in the season when he opted out, and I just think that was a bad decision in my mind. And Breece Hall came in, the star running back of the Big 12, and he went out 1,500 rushing yards and 21 touchdowns. That's almost Najee Harris type of stats, and Najee Harris won the Doak Walker Award last year, and so obviously if you're in competition with Najee Harris, you know you're in a good place, and especially that's why I do have Brian Robinson in my top 5, because the guys he's sitting behind are the best in their position, literally, and that's why I think that they'll be good. And I just think that Breece Hall will have another great year next year. They have Brock Purdy returning. I'm very high on Brock Purdy, and I just think that with the experience and him having such a great year last year, I think he'll have even a better year. And I think Iowa State will make it to the Big 12 again, Big 12 championship again. I think that they have a shot to beat Oklahoma. Will they? I don't know. I think it's too early to tell. If I had to say now, I do think Oklahoma would win the game, but I do think it'd be close. Oklahoma, returning a lot of their players. They have a star running back returning. Then they have Spencer Rattler, who's a Heisman favorite right now to return. So it's tough to say if Iowa State can beat them. I don't think that they can, just based off right now, and the recruiting's not very good. Oklahoma is already recruiting very great into the future, and even especially just this year even. And so that's why I just think that Iowa State cannot get past Oklahoma, just the recruiting, and you lose a quarter of your roster each year to graduation. If they're recruiting the number 54th recruiting class in the country, that doesn't give me any hope that they can compete with a team like Oklahoma, who's in the top 10 ranks for recruiting classes every single year. And I think that they can make a good shot. I think they'll probably make a New Year's Six bowl game, Iowa State, this year. But Oklahoma, the will easily, not easily, but I think that they'll find it quite easy to win the Big 12, just with Iowa State not recruiting as well, and that was their biggest competitor last year. And so we'll see what happens in the Big 12. That is going to wrap it up for today's video. If you guys did enjoy, please leave a like down below and a comment, and thank you.